Many of the main players in underground metal spend their musical lives in character, as characters. Of course, this is most prevalent in black metal, where everyone has had a name or a pseudonym at some point. But for one person, the character is everything, so much so that it's hard to know where the latex mask ends and the real person behind it begins. So I kind of wanted to find out. I wanted to find out a bit more about him. Today we're talking to Mortiis, otherwise known as Havard Elefson. He was there pretty much right at the beginning of Norwegian black metal, as you'll hear him describe, and yet since those early years he's steadfastly done his own thing, ploughed his own furrow, composing first Tolkien-style soundscapes before moving more lately to a kind of more industrial rock sound. He's always been a bit of a curio of the scene to me. The ears, the nose, the bat wings, and as we'll hear from him, it's a costume for which he suffered ridicule in the press particularly, as well as benefited, as it allowed him to cut his own identity. So he is a real other. He sits at the scene's fringes, or has done for a long time, and yet he's got a very realistic sense of who he is and what he's all about in comparison to some of the people that I've talked to in the past. So welcome to the Metal Insight Podcast, episode 33, produced and recorded by metalireland.com. Now, I told you last time round of a competition that's running on Metal Ireland at the moment, the chance to win a set of Alpine ear protectors. My hearing is absolutely screwed. I'm just too long going to gigs without earplugs like an idiot, too long standing in front of drum kits during heavy metal practices like a total idiot. If I could go back and change it, if I could go back in time, I would and should have wore earplugs. I can't even tell you what it's like trying to get to sleep at night with tinnitus ringing in my ears. It's horrible, and I don't want anyone else to have that. So don't make the same mistake as me and so many others. I mean, I know you guys who read the Metal Ireland forums have seen us talking at length about this over recent months. All of us who've suffered from ringing in our ears or lack of hearing. Don't make the same mistake. Wear earplugs. So because I believe in this so much, I'm on a little bit of a crusade. I want to help you guys. I've teamed up with Alpine, who make earplugs, to give away 10 sets of them on Metal Ireland. So if you want to enter for the chance to win those for free, just go to the metalireland.com homepage and you'll see all you need to know. Okay, now over to Mortiis. And the thing that surprised me most about our conversation was his absolute realism. No spooky characters anywhere.
My first musical sort of experimenter, endeavor was being a singer in a death metal band that started in 1990, 27 years ago.
Scary, isn't
Getting
it?
old. So I did that, and that lasted. We were still in school. It was like me and a friend. Actually, that friend was in Ishan's class, and Ishan, he had his band going on with Thomas, who became Seamoth, and we started our band. So we were sort of like, the only two bands happening, and our little sort of close-minded farmer fucking community thing. That lasted a few months. Then me and the guitar player basically went straight on to a different band, which was more like a doom type band, and that lasted another 6 months maybe. And interestingly, one of the band name suggestions for that band was Thou Shalt Suffer, which Ishan later asked me if he could take because we didn't use it. Then the Emperor thing came along, and I did bass, for a little over a year. And obviously because of my, I don't know if it's like that official or not, but basically the reason they asked me to leave was actually because I had, back in those days, I had a bad temper. Today I don't, but back in those days I was just fucking pissed off all the time. And, so that didn't last too long. So, 3 bands in, trying to be a metal guy. I was like, you know what? Fuck it, I'm just going to go solo, because by that point it was early 1992. No, wait, it was late 1992. Sorry. I'd started discovering a lot of these sort of electronic type bands, primarily early sort of German pioneers in the genre, Kraftwerk, Tangerine Dream, Klaus Schulze, the sort of the big names. games,
Yeah.
So I was really getting into the atmosphere, especially of the sort of, the Tangerine Dream and the Klaus Schulzes, who were doing these super long songs. Their early stuff was basically 2 songs, one side per side of the LP, 25 minutes, mega fucking atmospheric, and I was really getting into it because, of course, the whole black metal thing was really starting to become a big deal for me. So that worked great, with my sort of search for the ultimate, sort of dark-ish atmosphere. So that's a long story. But that's how I got into it. So at the time when I left Emperor, I was like, okay, I've been in 3 bands in 2.5 years or so, and every time it ends up with a split or just leaving, and there's not a lot of people around where I was, where I lived with my parents at the time, to start bands with. So
it's interesting. I mean,
like,
one of the things that fascinates me and has done for a long time is the different parts of Norway and the different bands that it gave rise to, the different people it gave rise to. So am I correct in saying, maybe I'm wrong here, but were you guys round about Telemark or somewhere like that, or somewhere near Kristiansand or something? Where were you guys?
Yeah, I mean, you're right and you're wrong. You're right about Telemark. That's where we came from. That's the county. I mean, Telemark is like a chunk of the country, like your Californias and your Wisconsins or whatever. So that's kind of the way it works in Norway, with counties. So Telemark is where Notodden and Akerhaugen were, and those places where Emperor basically came from.
Yeah.
And also my other bands and Mortiis itself, of course, for as long as I stayed in Norway. I moved to Sweden in '94. Kristiansand that you mentioned is further south. I mean, Telemark is fairly south as well, but Kristiansand is like way down by the south coast.
I mean, the interesting thing is that the character, I guess you guys at that time, you guys were all in school and stuff like that, but I guess, very, very different to the bands in Bergen, or the bands in Oslo, who were doing quite different things. What was it about, the atmosphere or the sense of place about when you were growing up that made it into your, your very Tolkien-esque early music?
I don't know if there was anything in my environment. I mean, I get that question quite a lot, because I'm from Norway, and people have this idea that Norway is this amazingly picturesque visual place, and I suppose to a certain degree it is, because it's so small and so sort of diverse, with you got your mountains and your coastlines and all that stuff, and forests and everything. But I mean, what country doesn't? I mean,
Ireland does. Ireland has tons of stuff.
I mean, you got some pretty cool stuff going on, and even Americans, I'm always surprised by Americans going, your country's like awesome. It's like, I would have moved. I'm like thinking, you live in this huge. If you want to look at the visual side of it, I mean, the United States is pretty diverse, man. I mean, you get deserts and huge mountain ranges, and big forests.
It's funny because I once read an interview with I don't know if you remember, I'm sure you do. Back in the sort of mid to late 90s, there was this kind of metal band called Amen or something, and
Casey,
well, I remember reading an interview where he was like, you Norwegians are so noble and stuff like that, and I just thought, please.
Noble?
Yeah.
We're noble now?
Yeah, it was,
I don't know about that, man. I mean, I've spent 80% of my life I spent in Norway, and I'm yet to see a noble Norwegian.
Yeah. Well, look, I mean, one of the things I've always wondered is you have spent your life, your musical life, in character, as it was. You're not Harvard, you're Mortiis. Do you ever wish that you had stepped out into the world as Harvard?
I think I have done, man. I mean, I know where you're coming from, but I think perhaps that's sort of like an idea that might just stick around since the 90s, when Mortiis was way more mysterious, because there were no real, there wasn't really a lot of photos of me without the mask and everything from back in those days when Mortiis was a different thing. Ever since the social media and everything, I mean, I'm pretty active on social media, and I'm not putting up an act or anything like that. I think to a large degree, people they see what they want to see, So
Yeah.
they sort of create this idea that Mortiis is a strange dude.
Yeah.
I'm starting to sound like Donald Trump now. He's a bad hombre.
Sad, very
oh,
bad.
God damn it, man! Let's not get into that.
Well, look, I think one of the things that also fascinated me was about, around about the time of the Stargate,
Yeah.
black metal had already become quite a massive product at that time. The likes of Dimmu Borgir and stuff like that had really taken it to...
Yeah, Cradle of Filth, those bands were getting big.
Of course, but at the same time, you yourself, everybody pretty much knew you as well in the scene, because you were the prime keyboardist of the era. And something I always wondered was how you maintained yourself as a solo artist, because I thought you must have been getting calls from labels and everybody, to join, their black metal band because they wanted the keyboardist of the moment. And I just wondered what it was like for you at about that time.
To be honest, I didn't really get a lot of calls like that. I did get a couple of them from some bands that did become rather large later on. I'm not going to mention names because I don't even know if they remember it, and I don't want to get into anything. But I had a couple of requests quite early on. For the 2-3 years after I left, Emperor, and I started the whole keyboard thing. But the thing is, I turned them down because, first of all, I was never a great player. I always just created atmospheres, and everything was sort of happening within my comfort zone, which is a very small little bubble, to be honest with you, man. I'm not much of a collaborator. I don't know musical theory or anything like that. I wouldn't be able to do like some sort of... I wouldn't be able to do a performance on stage with a band playing live keyboard that would be worth paying for, to be brutally honest with you. So when I got those requests, I was like, that's fucking cool. I wish I was a better player, because then maybe I could have done it. But I decided not to, simply because I didn't want to. I would have made the bands worse.
Wow.
I think
you're a bit down on yourself.
Oh, dude, have you heard my records?
Of course. What are you talking about? Well, you know what? I had this great conversation a while back with so you'll remember, Cradle of Filth from around about the mid-90s. Their keyboardist was a guy called Damien. He was actually he's from Ireland. In fact, he's from Northern Ireland, quite close to where I grew up. And recently we had a really good conversation, and he was reflecting on laying the keyboards to Dusk and Her Embrace, which is a really brilliant album keyboard wise. And I remember he said he was really, really nervous going out on stage to Dynamo and stuff like that, trying to play stuff.
I can imagine.
And that's a highly pressurized scenario, so I know what you mean.
Totally. And there's this old, maybe this is just me, but there's something about, I like keyboards, but there's a time and a place for them. And I'm not sure if I grew up with metal. My earliest memory in life is Kiss and Elvis Presley. Beyond that, that's the earliest memory I've got. So that marked my life for as long as I'm going to live. There's something about keyboards in metal that I'm not sure about it, dude. It's sometimes I think it works. I like bands like Dio where they have it as a background thing, but can you imagine being a fucking keyboard player on stage? Everybody else is rocking out and doing the whole thing that you do when you're in a metal band on stage, and
you're stuck at the back looking like Rick Wakeman.
Yeah, and Rick Wakeman's awesome, man. I got some nostalgic fucking relationships with some of his records.
All right then, Jordan Rudess.
I'm sorry?
The guy from Dream Theater.
Oh, that's a different story. I you know what? A friend of mine, I know we're digressing a bit, but a friend of mine, and back in the 90s, told me he's a fantastic musician, so of course he's going to make stuff like Rush and Dream Theater and Frank Zappa and stuff like that, but he dragged me along to a Dream Theater concert, and I fucking fell asleep. I fell asleep at a Dream Theater concert. That's as far as that fucking band goes for me. Yeah. I respect him to absolutely to the end of the world, because fantastic musicianship and all that. But just, I've always been like, okay, so you can play like a motherfucker, right? But is your music interesting? Are your songs any good?
But you hit upon a really important point, which is that keyboards in metal, it's just not straightforward, is it?
Awkward.
It's difficult.
It's cool in the studio when you can just sit down and do what you do, and you can record stuff in your underpants, and it doesn't matter, you know. Once you get on stage and you're in front of a keyboard, a headbanging keyboard player, doesn't that look kind of weird?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Look,
I'm glad that they're trying and performing and just being there and working with the music and the noise and the crowd and all that stuff. But it's just like, fuck, man, it's a bit weird, man.
Yeah.
That's coming from me, a keyboard guy.
It's true. I mean, I think the real change then in your attitude plainly happened between, you know, the Stargate and Smell of Rain. That seemed to me to be the big stylistic shift.
Yeah, that was the big breakdown. During the entire second half of the 90s, I had this sort of, I guess, a latent type of depression. It was just something that I found out that I'd had inside of me for a long time. And towards the late 90s, it was really starting to come out. It was this sort of sense of isolation. And because, you know, I'm sure there's a lot of reasons for that stuff happening, but with Mortiis, I mean, I'm pretty sure I've always had to take a somewhat larger dose of criticism than most other musicians, because what I do is obviously a bit weird and strange. What I do, it's a strange kind of choice with the image that I used to have versus the music and you know, all that stuff. I've always been in my own, ever since I was a kid, I've just done my own thing, and I've been comfortable in my own universe. I haven't let too many people in. I mean, I've taught myself to be very sort of forthcoming and honest, and you know, not socially what's the word, you know, nervous or anything like that. I just fucking, you know, I just talk and I do my thing, and I stand for it, you know. But I've taken a lot of criticism. I still do take a lot of fucking shit, man, for what I do, because it's different and it's not sort of anything you can completely and totally pigeonhole. I take shit in the metal community, which is, it's fine, you know. And I totally take shit in the fucking sort of elitist, almost, you know, sometimes industrial / electronic community, because we have a lot of those elements, you know. Because what I do is, it's just not genre definable. It's we're falling between two chairs. You know,
I think people have a way in because of the mask, the ears, the nose. It just gives people a way in to take the piss a little bit, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, especially in the UK. I mean, dude, you have no idea how much fucking ridicule I had to handle when I signed with Eric Records, and all of a sudden Mortiis kind of floated, you know, up and out of the underground, and you know, because, you know, sort of pre-Eric, the best that I could hope for was like a half a page in Terrorize or something like that. I mean, beyond that, it was just pure underground stuff, and that was a kind of a safe place to be, because underground guys, you know, are so dedicated, and they're like music archaeologists, man. You know, they search, and they're loyal, and they're open-minded, a lot of them. Not everybody, but, you know, so the underground was actually pretty cool. The sort of hard times didn't really hit until you know, my records started getting into the shops, and some of these mags started you know, opening their eyes to it and going like, oh, here's a guy we can make fun of.
Yeah. But
like,
it's interesting because if I didn't realize that. So you have this mask, you have this persona or alter ego or character that you step into, right?
Kind of, yeah.
But
that was never intentional, though. That it happens when you get into that all that stuff and you put the mask on. Everything, it's impossible not to be very conscious about it.
But that's my question. It's like you can't just take the mask off again and walk away. The criticism of the character must have hurt you as a criticism of you.
Oh yeah, it's because to me, Mortiis is me. It's like it's not like it's not a scripted thing. It's not a play, you know. I realize it sounds slightly contradictory to what I just said, but I mean, it's basically a part of who I am. Yeah. And it was, and even more so back in those days, me and Mortiis. I mean, you know, we were the same guy, you know. And yeah, sure, when I put that stuff on, you become very self-conscious, and you realize that, okay, I just stepped into this visual transfer. You know, I just transformed myself radically visually, and of course I'm aware of it, and it probably alters the way that I act. And I do. What I did realize very quickly was that I talk a lot less when I have that stuff on, but I don't know why. It's just that some these little psychological changes that happen in you. And I'm sure, like, you know, any image heavy band might feel the same way, you know, like once they're into that whole visual aspect of it, once you get all their stuff on, you know, there might be a slight change in personality there. It's not even intentional, it just happens.
Yeah, was the label surprised by the sort of reaction and the flack with that elevation, or did they see it coming, or?
They're probably experienced enough to just go like, okay, well, let's just go Gene Simmons way about it and just figure, you know, all PR is good PR.
Yeah.
You know, the more magazines talk about their artists, I mean, the better off they will be, because, you know, it's like free advertising.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fine line though, isn't it?
I never heard them worry about it. I've never heard anybody that I've dealt with on a sort of a commercial level worry about, you know, whether or not some big magazine is taking the piss out of it. I think they're just happy that they're getting the coverage.
Yeah, indeed.
The only guy that kind of, at the end of the night, the only guy that kind of sits there and going like, oh fuck, you know, another day of being fucking ridiculed is me. But I developed thick skin about it. I mean, at the end, you know, I just started, oh, here we go again, you know. British media trying to be comedians. Yeah. With their fucking juicy headlines and whatever. And,
it's weird because, you know, you go and see metal on the continent, and I mean, I think of Germany first and foremost, you know, where the theatre of metal is just so much more a part and parcel and accepted. You come over this direction and everybody's a cynic, you know, everybody's a cynic, everybody's an armchair, you know, expert, you know.
There's a lot less piss taking in the rest of Europe, I can tell you that. That's at least that's my experience, you know.
We are floating above the mountains.
The change happened with the smell of rain, the industrial, the EBM, the overtly sort of not cyber, but, you know, the kind of electronic influence just came straight in and progressed ever since, really. I mean, it's funny because there's some stuff I hear in your music that actually reminds me of Jean-Michel Jarre and Vangelis and stuff like that. I just get this little sense of it in there. Were they ever influences for you?
Absolutely. I mean, it's interesting that you mentioned those guys. I mean, they're I was getting into Jean-Michel Jarre, you know, and Vangelis, obviously. Also Rick Wakeman and Mike Oldfield, and, you know, they're not necessarily like electronic in the sense that Jean-Michel Jarre would be, or you know, Kraftwerk and more pure sort of music like that. But Vangelis was fucking epic, dude. I mean, the stuff he did was fucking unbelievable.
I love it. I love it.
At the age of 4 or something like that. Pure genius.
It's amazing. His stuff's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. I haven't heard everything he's done, but I started collecting in the early 90s because Euronymous from Mayhem, when he was alive, he was putting me onto a lot of electronic music. He was a big fan of it himself.
Really?
Oh, totally. I mean, it's kind of like it's one of those weirdly kept secrets. It's not even a secret. I just don't know. I never understood why more people didn't know.
Yeah.
It wasn't like he was trying to hide it. The guy had a really broad sense of music taste. He's the one that taught me how. He taught me to. He introduced me, you know, to early Ultravox of all freaking bands in the world that you can come up with.
Yeah.
And to this day, I love Ultravox. Like, you know, up until the mid '80s, pretty much until they split up. You know, I thought they were an amazing band. Just the melodies and just everything is really cool.
The coldness, that self-titled album, the coldness of it is incredible. But you make a good point that actually sort of Euronymous had, you know, he was into this very developed sense of what dark music actually meant.
Yeah, I think he was constantly sort of looking for, you know, atmospheres and sort of you know, in his way, darkness in music, and there's a lot of it. There's a lot of melancholy, you know, or melancholia, whatever you call it, and going on, and even in like pop music, Ultravox had a lot of these sort of sad, longing type of songs. You know, their music was pretty bleak sometimes.
It's interesting because actually one of the things I wanted to say, now you mentioned sort of pop music, and You Put a Hex on Me always seemed to me to have, and I'm not saying it's you know, directly referenced, but It seems to remind me of Dead or Alive's "You Spin Me Right Round" a bit.
Yeah, a lot of people said that back in those days. And the weird thing is, at that time, I did not own any Dead or Alive records. I think I have that LP now. I think I probably bought it. I have like thousands of vinyls upstairs. So I'm starting to lose control.
Yeah.
And of course, I know this song. But back in those days, when I wrote "You Protect Me," which was probably around 2000, maybe even late '99. I mean, I don't know. It was one of the earlier songs I wrote for "This Gonna Rain." And I always knew when I was coming up with the sort of the main sort of sequence of chords, it sounded really familiar to me. But then I started like, and as soon as I hear music, I start putting vocals on top of it, and I was like, I can't throw this away. This is really cool. But yeah, I mean, I've been told, and then somebody has also mentioned Blue Monday or something like that. Which but I think Dead or Alive is a closer comparison.
It's funny because Pete Burns. And you know, he was a pretty troubled guy, and he had his character, which obviously resulted in him sort of like rebuilding his whole face and stuff like that. He was, you know, he was walking around in a mask, in a way.
Yeah,
you know.
His mask seems to have been way more on a personal, sort of trying to find his true identity kind of level, though. I mean, because I am aware of he did all these alterations, surgical alterations. Was he like a transgender or something?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah, that happened later, though, didn't it?
It did. Yeah, it did.
Yeah, I cannot imagine having that kind of identity crisis, or you know, not even, maybe that's offensive to say. I don't mean that in a really offensive way, but
no, I know what you mean. But obviously the inner turmoil is what you're referring to.
Yeah, that's great. That's what I want.
Yeah. Look, I mean, let's talk about the new album, because Great Saver. I mean, the thing that strikes me about it is that the production is a lot more aggressive than the recent, you know, certainly Some Kind of Heroin and stuff, and Grudge.
Yeah.
The production's it's got a sharper edge to it. It's a bit, it's not quite as clean. It's a bit dirtier. What were you trying to achieve with the new album?
Pretty much what you just said.
Well, that's good.
we just I don't know. I mean, I just get more when I get into the music mode of things. I tend to just I just try to channel all these raw emotions, and I think in the past we've failed a couple times. I think we have records out there that are essentially good, but to be honest, the production, we just should have done a better job at it.
Yeah.
Which is a pity. And we finally just kind of nailed it, you know, with The Great Deceiver. But we spent a long time. I think we spent like 2 months in the studio just basically mixing and doing some, you know, re-recordings and everything. And we lost our minds, you know. This is one of those records where you lose members, you lose friends, you lose business associates. I mean, we pretty much shed everybody. At the end of the day, it was just me and Levi Lefts just worked on that record. So it was a brutal journey.
I hope that's not related to those temper issues you talked about at the start.
No, it's if anything, it's more related to weeding out the fucking bullshit. You know, like people. What your manager used to say, people making noise. You know what I mean? I mean, making noise, that's in a bad way. You know, just people with bad attitudes or people trying to fuck us over. Stuff like that. So all that stuff was going on in between studio sessions and everything. So that might have affected it. You know, the whole sort of revenge, the desire to fucking get you back. You know. But also, of course, you know, you learn from your mistakes, and you know, whatever we did on the previous album, we thought we didn't do well, we do it differently this time around, and so on. So it's always about improving
and then taking it out on the road.
I'm sorry.
So then taking it out on the road and letting it really find itself, the way you have to let songs find themselves playing them live.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know. I can't speak for other bands and artists, but for us, once we get on stage, it's really not like on record at all. I mean, yeah, The Great Deceiver it's just kind of like an angry, deep, dense, pissed off record. But live, it's always been even more. It to me, and I don't know if this is a sort of a ignorant thing to say, but because I'm not that I'm not an expert on the punk movement or anything like that, but it feels like we're almost performing like a punk band when we're on stage. It just gets kind of wild and crazy and sloppy a lot of times, because it's a lot more about the performance, itself, and then sort of musical perfectionism live.
See, people might be interested to know, because it's hard. It's easy to imagine how songs grow and breathe and get sloppy with a band, guitar, bass, drums and stuff. But with a lot of stuff that relies on programming, loops, samples, keyboards, surely that stuff is all kind of rigid and set in stone in many ways.
Yeah, I mean that's probably what saves us.
Yeah,
live.
Right. Okay.
You have that sort of immovable framework that just fucking stomps on regardless. So we can always try to reel ourselves back in. I mean, I fuck up on lyrics like continuously because I get so pumped up on adrenaline. I'm always scared shitless before I go on stage. It doesn't matter how long I've done it. I'm always really, really nervous. So there's all this sort of energy building up, and so there's varying results from that. I mean, one of them is of course me starting to mess up the lyrics, and sometimes I mess up like where am I at in the actual song, because I like it loud on stage, and the louder, because that will make me perform better. If it's really low, I get very self-conscious, so I always ask the monitor guy to just pump it up, man. Yeah. Right. As long as it doesn't feed back a lot, that's kind of like that's a pain in the ass. But of course, the louder things get on stage, the more sort of it kind of turns into like this noisy sort of soup of it's like a wall of sound on stage, So sometimes you lose yourself. You're like, where are we? What's going on? Yeah. But of course, that's where the advantage of having some of these sort of, like you said, the rigid sort of samples and the sequences going on in the background, and you can kind of orientate yourself a little bit, and you can reel yourself back in pretty quickly. And most of the times, I think I get away with it. It doesn't seem like people notice.
You've obviously got your web store, and you've reissued the Bond albums and stuff like that. And how hard is it to plow your own furrow in the music industry these days? Because as you say, you went your own way. You broke with the crowd many years ago now. You broke with the crowd. You went your own way. You stood for your own thing. Took a bit of stick. Ultimately, you still have to make it work. How hard is that?
Yeah. How hard is it these days?
Yeah.
It feels like there's a lot of people out there now making music, putting out records. It felt like that back in '95 because I mean, I started buying records in the '80s, underground stuff, and you didn't have stuff coming out every day. There weren't a fuckload of bands out there. There might have been, but most of them never got to release a record. Today everybody's on socials. Everybody's putting their stuff out through TuneCore or on directly on iTunes or whatever, or Bandcamp. So there's a massive. It feels like there's massive competition now, and I kind of hate using that word because we're all supposed to be sort of solidarity or whatever you fucking call it with each other. Solidarity.
Yeah.
So, it feels weird to even use the word competition. It feels weird to use the word industry and business. But, I mean, in a way, you kind of have to think that way. Otherwise, I don't think you're going to survive.
No, of course.
But, yeah, it's... there's ups and downs, man. I mean, I love the whole social media thing where you can get your links to whatever you're selling out instantly. And, it's 30 seconds later, if you're popular, you can have a sale. So that's cool, but I mean, you're competing with a ton of people, so it kind of feels, things aren't selling the way they used to. That's old news,
Yeah.
I mean, I could, in the 90s when I was also running my own label, I mean, I could put out a vinyl, and 2 weeks later, I mean, I would have sold hundreds and hundreds of copies of it, whatever, These days, that's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
It's rougher now. I don't know exactly. I think well, who knows? So, I kind of just have a feeling that it's because everybody today can release a record.
Yeah.
And you can do it on your own. And a lot of people are doing it on their own or starting their own labels, etc., etc. That wasn't really happening a lot back in the old days. People were always looking for a record deal because everybody thought they were going to be huge rock stars.
Yeah. Does it make you think toward the future, you know, say when you're, I don't know, 50 or 55 or something? Do you ever think ahead? You know,
I'm not going to be that old. I'm just kidding. Well, I mean, I did that thinking ahead years and years ago when I had my first kid. When my daughter was born almost 9 years ago, I went like, you know what, fuck this. This music industry is horrible. It's terrible. I love making music, but as soon as you want to get out there and put out records and play shows, you're part of this really evil, fucked up, greedy game. So what I did was I went out there and I got myself a job, and I still have that job.
Yeah.
So that's the only way. I mean, you have to be realistic about it.
Yeah.
You know, you can't think that you're going to make a living off of your musical, because you know what? That's like winning the goddamn lottery.
Yeah, it is. It is.
So
it is.
You know, I mean, you could. It's a nice little sort of side income.
Yeah.
Obviously, there are all kinds of reasons to keep doing it, and just being creative. And if you're a creative person, I mean, you shouldn't stop doing it, because it'll probably make you a better person. It'll make you happy. You know, then you should do it.
But it's a kind of salutary kind of lesson that even the bands whose names we know, like you, Mortiis, and plenty more, really just have to do this to be creative and get a side income from being creative these days, and to keep your legacy and your name going, because it certainly isn't gonna do it for you in terms of, you know, family and stuff.
No, it's not. It's not going to cover the expenses of being a family guy, and you know, just being a member of reality, man. I mean, you know, it's not. It's very. It costs a lot. Fucking hell, I'm swallowing my tongue. It costs a lot of money to be an adult in life. You have all these expenses. We all know that. You know, you got your house, you got your car, you got your fucking insurance and your phones and all these real expenses. And when you have kids, it's like, don't even get me started. So you got to be realistic about it. But of course, if you're creative and if you've done music and you've done all that stuff and that's in your blood, you shouldn't stop doing it. Yeah. But of course, you know, like I said, you got to be realistic about it too. You know, maybe having a job on the side, so to speak, it's like your safety net, you know. Yeah. I don't want to see my kids go hungry. I mean, that's like, fuck, that's never going to happen. You know, I'll do anything to avoid that.
So that's it for episode 33. I hope you found it insightful, and I hope you got a little glimpse behind the mask of one of black metal's lesser credited artists. We're back next week with an extra special podcast. It'll be Alan and Owen from Dread Sovereign who are in front of the mic, and I must say we really did have a great chat all about that new album they've got out. So till then, from the Metal Insight podcast, produced and reported by Metal Ireland, over and out.